Hi, this is Stan and Jamie with ICF Colorado, and I'm here today with Paul Boehnke, who will be our speaker for the February 13th chapter meeting. And he'll be discussing the ubiquitous topic of our inner critic in his presentation called Adversary to Ally, How to Coach the Inner Critic. So Paul Boehnke is a sought-after speaker, author, and certified life coach who helps millennials and business leaders become more effective by clearing the fog of doubt, self-criticism, and overthinking that prevents them from realizing their true purpose. Um, as a classical musician, Paul Boehnke stumbled on a unique process that not only helped his performances, but could easily be applied to taming the negative thoughts of his inner critic. Then he realized this process not only works for him, but for everyone, musician or not. And so in his book, Thoughts on Demand, Turn Negative Self-Talk into Unstoppable Confidence, he shares the process that he uses to help clients transform that little voice in their heads into a champion of their potential. So Paul Boehnke, thank you, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Stan. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So in your bio, talked about your being a musician. How did you go from musician to coach, or what else is part of the story that we should know?
Yeah, so I was a classical musician, performing musician for about 30 years or so. And what looked on the outside to be like, you're doing what? Stopping all your music and you're becoming a coach is like, how does this possibly happen? On the inside, it felt like a very small shift of attention, actually. I sort of discovered three things. While I was being a musician, particularly at the end. The first thing I noticed was that I love performing. This was a great way to make a living. But there was something not completely satisfying about it. It was fine, but it wasn't fabulous. And I also noticed, well, the whole thing about being an artist, really, it's about so much more than just mastering the tools or the techniques of your art. It's really mastering yourself so that creativity has a place to be and to flow through. If there's too many issues in the way, it's not going to happen. I loved that part about being an artist. And I loved helping my students with that too. So that was sort of the second clue that, oh, I really love this thing. The third clue was when I looked at all the books that I'd been reading for those 30 years, and it was quite a good sized stack. It was almost never about music. It was almost always about things like spirituality and personal development and mythology and all those sorts of things. And I felt like I had this sort of um, almost a double life, that there was this public part of me that people knew me as a musician and a performer. And then there was this almost closeted part who was doing all this reading about what seemed like this other topic. Well, eventually I realized that actually these two things were two aspects of the same path. And for me, this path was all about growth and authentic expression. And when I realized that all this was one, it was like, oh, I don't have this divided life that it felt like I had. I have this unified life. And what I'm really finding myself drawn to is this coaching thing. And so for me, on the inside, it felt like going from this direction to this direction. Very easy shift. But that's kind of a long story about sort of how I got there.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just curious, what's your instrument?
So I was a harpsichordist and conductor mainly.
Oh, wow. Okay, so classical music.
Classical, and if we're going to get really specific, Baroque. I sort of lived in the 17th and 18th centuries. Although I took baths more often than they did. So, you know.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
So when I was looking at this topic and after you and I spoke the first time, I was thinking about the inner critic, and I love this topic. And the thing I think is most interesting, like, well, I here you go. There's my inner critic talking about me stuttering over what I'm about to say. That's hilarious. I feel like I have a really strong inner critic. And as I'm saying it, I realize that I don't think I'm alone. I just am so used to my own inner critic that it feels like mine's the biggest. Like
Yeah.
there's something about like I've lived through having a really strong inner critic. And Yeah, and so I'm really curious about how you tamed your inner critic, or how you found this process, and what it is that you have to of course we're going to hear that during the talk, but like what is it that you're passionate about with the inner critic, and how did you get there? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny you share that yes, I have first of all, you are not alone. We've all got these little voices in our head, and I have to say probably most of us have this tendency to think that, yeah, but mine is way worse than yours. That makes us feel special, which is always a nice thing. It is also a funny little what do I want to say, trick of the inner critic to say, yes, your inner critic, meaning me, I am so big, you will never get over me. It's a way that the inner critic has to sort of keep us stuck. So completely normal, completely expected, completely common, maybe not so helpful, but there we are. So what, and of course, as a performer, as I mentioned, one of the biggest things about being an artist is getting your own junk out of the way, which includes all those messages in your head. And as a performer on stage, I needed my brain and my body and my emotions to all do what I needed them to do and to do it on cue. Sort of whether I felt like it or not, I needed to figure out how I could get myself to feel like it, to think what I needed to think in the moment. And there's certain tricks and techniques that performers can use to do that. Well, it has a lot to do with training your brain to think what you want. Well, couldn't I apply that to all these other little negative messages? Couldn't I train myself to have messages that were supportive and encouraging? Answer turned out to be yes, you can do that. And that's what this whole presentation is about sort of taking apart what's really going on inside with these negative messages, what you can do about them, and how do you create a new habit so that those old messages are not weighing you down so much.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm you know we I think we all feel that fraud, and this is, I mean, this is such an important topic, especially as coaches, because you were mentioning like when you get up on stage you need to perform no matter what you're feeling at the time. I mean, as coaches we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We need to embody a coaching mindset, which is we need to let go of the stuff that's going on with us so that we can be with our clients. um I can't, yeah, even when I'm feeling confident, it's not that this is ever goes away completely. Yeah. So how, during this presentation, what are we going to experience? How are we going to learn this? What's going to happen?
So we will begin actually by just taking a look at some of the hundreds and hundreds of ways this inner critic manifests in our life. We can find ourselves procrastinating, or we can find ourselves feeling like an imposter, or this list goes on and on. So first, we're just going to take a look at some of the ways, all the amazing number of ways that this voice shows up in our life and what it causes us to do. And we'll sort of begin to identify, oh yeah, this is one that I'm experiencing, or here's 15 that I'm experiencing. So we get a little more familiar about how it shows up in our lives. And I will take probably my guess is about 3 or so of them, and we'll sort of go through and talk about some client examples of mine of how this inner critic showed up for them in some of the more common ways that most people have a tendency to experience. And then we'll sort of take a look at what's really going on underneath those messages. Not the surface level ones that we all hear and are fighting with, but what's going on underneath. Because when we can uncover what's going on underneath, then we've got something really powerful to work with, something that we can change because we're getting to the root of the issue, not the surface level. And I will then at some point also describe this process that I've written about in the book and that I use with my clients about how you actually go about changing those habitual thought patterns. It's not a long, complicated process. It's almost stupidly simple when you just say it. Its power comes in the depth of some of the phases that really get down to the root of what's going on. So that's in a nutshell what I'm going to be sharing, so that you will have something to walk away with. Oh, here's a process that I can use for myself, I can use with my clients, that can help them reprogram those thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, just thinking, if only it could make me a better musician. So
Well,
is
practice is part of that. I will say some training and practice that all helps. And if there's stuff going on in your head, okay, that's kind of a different issue. But yes.
right. Is there anything else we should know about this presentation coming up? Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, I love it to be as much conversational as we can. I don't really want this to be about a talking head that's, sitting on your computer screen. I love to hear back and forth what people's experiences are, what they're feeling about this, what they notice, what are their questions, what are their I love to make it a conversation.
Perfect. So thank you so much. Thank you, Paul Boehnke for joining us, and thank you all of you for listening to this about this exciting event. The chapter meeting again is on February 13th, 2025. If you haven't already registered, I invite you to go to the ICF Colorado website, and you can register there. And I just really hope to see you all there. And again, thank you so much, Paul Boehnke, for joining for the and sharing with us how we can tame this very ubiquitous inner critic.
It's been my pleasure, Stan. I look forward to the meeting in February.
Yes, thank you.